All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Pearl, and I'm the president of the main chapter of the Reading League. Thank you for being here with us today. I know a lot of you are here after a busy day of teaching like me, so we're glad to have you. And we wouldn't be here today without the support of our sponsors. So thank you to Amplify and Keys to Literacy and Jolly Learning for your support and participation in this event. I know some of you are here today or will watch later when on the recording. And we're so lucky to spend an hour and a half with Colleen Yasenchock today. Colleen is an advisor and content support developer for Keys to Literacy with over 30 years of experience in education. She has held diverse pre-K to 12 roles, including teacher, literacy specialist, coach, and coordinator, and has worked nationwide as a science of reading consultant since 2010. Certified in elementary education, special education, and as a reading and writing specialist, Colleen was also trained to be a LETRS regional trainer and Dibbles, now Acadience, mentor. She has developed and taught science of reading-based courses at Granite State College and the University of Southern Maine, and is a frequent speaker at state and national conferences. Colleen co-admins the Science of Reading Third Grade and Beyond Facebook group and supports the Reading League Maine as a member of the Advisory Council. She's the proud mother to a thriving neurodivergent adult daughter and an active advocate for literacy equity. So we're thrilled to have you here today, Colleen. Thank you for bringing all of your knowledge and sharing with us and taking the time to be with us. I'll invite everyone to drop any questions that you have into the chat as we go. And at the end, we'll have some time for some Q&A, although Colleen did say it was okay for us to interrupt her occasionally, or one of the TRL board members to interrupt occasionally with a question if we had one that seemed like it would be appropriate in the moment. Um, so as you know, we're recording it. The recording will be available after, and we also have a contact certificate for hours that you'll get in an email afterwards. So if you don't get those things, please reach out. So again, thank you so much for being here, Colleen, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here. I did pop into the chat, so if you can find the chat feature, a link that will take you to a Wakelet that I have put together. And you're going to want to hang on to that link because it's not going to go away. So you'll be able to access this forever and always as long as Wakelet is a thing. And there are a number of things that I'll talk about this afternoon that I will let you know. Everything for the most part is going to be on this Wakelet. And then some. So there are definitely things on the Wakelet that I won't get to touch on this afternoon, but lots of great resources there. So I just want to encourage you to keep that link handy, and we will make our way over to that throughout our time together today. Now I am here, as Sarah said, very happy to talk with y'all about adolescent literacy, literacy really in the content area as well as disciplinary literacy. It's a big topic. But I want to touch on some really key pieces today. And you're seeing my slide. This one is from Keys. So I'm going to give you a PDF copy of the PowerPoint. I will actually put it onto the Wakelet for you in the very first column. But we just, as a reminder, please not to utilize them and make them your own. But definitely, obviously, use the content for yourself. Okay, and so we're going to jump in. This is the QR code also to the same Wakelet. What I want to do for a moment actually is I'm maneuvering between my two screens. So let me just grab you guys and move you over here real quick. I'm going to do a quick stop share actually of the PowerPoint and just show you the Wakelet on my screen real quick here. All right, thumbs up, you're seeing the Wakelet. All right, just to make sure. All right, there at the top, you'll see again my name. That this is a focus on Tier 1. So all these resources, for the most part, focusing on what we need to do in Tier 1. And then you'll see several columns going across. And I just want to make sure I'm calling your attention to these, again, because of the value of the resources. And as I go throughout the slides and share some different things with you, I will again let you know that it's on here. If for some reason there's something that's not on here, the beauty of a Wakelet, because it's just like a Padlet, is it's a living, breathing thing, and we can add more things to it as time unfolds. All right, so I'm going to pop us back over to our PowerPoint and we're going to jump in and get talking about these things. I want to start off by providing some guiding questions for us for the afternoon. Number one, of course, is how does the science of reading extend or apply to upper grade levels, right? Grade 6, 12. What are the instructional implications? So what do we need to take from what we know as far as how this reaches up into upper grades? And importantly, who needs to know about this? You're here, so obviously you know this to be something of interest to you and something that's important, but who else might need to know about this that you might want to inform or share this with later on? So that's, of course, another thing for us to keep in mind as we are moving our way through, again, our PowerPoint. So if we're going to focus on Tier 1, so first and foremost, what is Tier 1 instruction? So just a little quick background building or, touching base on what we already know. When we think about Tier 1 instruction, we know that that is instruction for all of our students, right? And so when we look across that bottom piece where it says Tier 1, all students, that is all of our students from our high achieving, highly functional, above grade level students, all the way across through and to our students who may be struggling and may in fact have, for example, dyslexia or another language-based or learning disability that may be making things difficult for them. But we know that they're all students who, when we have them sitting in front of us during our Tier 1 instructional time, need to have their specific needs met. And there's a lot that they may need from us. So how do we get this all done? And do so in the best interest of all students is part of what I want to make sure that we're touching base on today. I love this table, this graphic that I'm sharing with you all right now because of how it shows the connection, the correlation between here we are in grade 6, 12, what are the types of literacy that we're talking about and that are happening in these grade levels. So down at the bottom, you see that's outside of my red frame, basic literacy. And basic literacy, that applies to those students who are still working on what we consider to be foundational literacy skills, right? They're still working to crack the code, if you will. They're still working to learn phonics and all of the pieces that go with it, morphology and all the pieces that go with it, and to become a more fluent comprehending reader. So we know we have students with those needs in our classrooms, and those students need to be receiving additional instruction outside of the Tier 1 block, right? Outside of Tier 1 instruction. Now, when we look at Tier 1 instruction, what's inside that red frame, we see that it includes both content literacy as well as disciplinary literacy. Content literacy are those things that are a little bit more general in the sense that there are strategies or routines, if you will, around vocabulary, around working on comprehension of text or of what I'm hearing or watching or listening to, along with strategies for writing that can be used really across most content or subject areas. But then we also know that there are some really specific things to discipline or disciplinary literacy that have to do with reading and writing and speaking and listening as a scientist, as a mathematician, as a historian. So those are really specialized reading strategies that are unique to those subject areas. It may be unique ways of writing, unique ways of sort of attacking or analyzing a specific piece of text. But all of that are things that happen during Tier 1 instruction. Now, oftentimes, we'll have students who may struggle a bit with getting to the disciplinary literacy pieces because oftentimes they're a little bit higher level than, say, content literacy pieces. So as a teacher in grade 6 to 12, I need to be aware that if I am trying to teach and use disciplinary literacy techniques and strategies with my students and they're struggling, it may be a good idea to kind of go back to some of the related strategies and techniques that really fall under content literacy and work on that. So an example of that, just to clarify that a bit, might be summary. So are my students struggling to generate a summary just in general, even about something every day? Is that something that they're having trouble with? Let alone being able to say, summarize the results of a science experiment, or summarize the events that led up to the Revolutionary War, or summarize, right, the procedure to be able to solve this math problem. So we want to be able to dip back into those strategies that are content literacy when we see our students struggling to do those things that are more unique within disciplinary literacy. And I'll touch a little bit more on that as we get to the second half of our time together this afternoon. Okay, so what I really want to start with is thinking about tier one instruction and whether or not it's effective. All right, so how do we know whether or not our tier one instruction is effective? Well, we look to some of those high stakes assessments, right? We might look to the state assessment data that is collected. We might look to some universal screeners that might be being used in our schools, such as Acadience or AimsWeb. Some people use NWEA or the MAPS assessment. You might be looking at NAEP scores or the course grades, right, to see how effective tier one instruction is. So I want us to think for a moment, if we are to decide, yes, our tier one instruction is very effective. We don't really have any concerns about it. And we know this because. So we know this because, and here's where I want to ask you to throw some info in the chat for me. What percentage of students would need to be at or above, and I'm going to use the term proficient here. What percentage of our students would need to be at or above proficient, say on the NAEP assessment or NWEA MAPS assessment or another universal screener that's being used in your school? What do you think that number would be, a percent number? And we're all friends here, so don't be shy about being willing to pop a number in there. Do you think it's 30%, 50%? What are you thinking? Well, you guys are spot on over here. We've got some good ideas happening in the chat. Okay. This gives me some good information about you all as well. So sometimes people are thinking, boy, tier one instruction, if we've got 30%, no, we know that's definitely not high enough. 51%, also not high enough. 68%, still not there. You guys got it in the chat. Thank you for answering that. So we know that we have to have 75 to 80%, and really that number should be 80%. 75 is sort of like giving a gift, right? We need 80% of our students, all students, right? Looking across all students, to be popping up as proficient in order to consider our tier one instruction to be effective. So if we don't have numbers like that yet, then we know we still have work to do on tier one. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Okay, so if we're looking at the national NAEP scores, that's what I was looking at when I was doing this particular slide. The national NAEP scores were showing us that as a nation, only about 30% of our eighth grade students, now this is on 2022, were at or above proficient. For fourth grade students, only 31%. And by the way, you can see that these numbers, let me fix that. These are the 2024 scores. And you can see that I left in parentheses how it compared to the 2022 score, right? So 24, 30% of eighth graders, that's 1% lower. So there's not growth there, right? As we can see. And so as a nation, what we can say from seeing these scores is that we're not there yet at having figured out our tier one instruction, right? We've got some work to do with the core and what we're doing. And the other thing that we know is when we see higher percentages of students not proficient, we can't just decide that we're going to intervene our way out of that situation, right? So intervention for those students, say, if we go back to these numbers, let me go back to these numbers. Say, 70% of our eighth graders aren't there yet, 70. We cannot intervene our way out of 70% of students not being proficient. So we know there's work to be done with tier one. And we're going to talk about some things we can do at the 6th to 12th grade level. All right, so science of reading in the older grades, what does it look like? I want to start with an expanded version of the simple view of reading. Thumbs up, you're familiar with the simple view of reading. You've seen this equation before. Perfect. You guys are my rock stars. So have you seen this expanded version? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm going to take a peek of your faces. So I'm seeing some yeses. All right. If you've not seen this before, I actually borrowed this or brought this over from the Mississippi Department of Education, 2021. And it, of course, is the expanded version of Goff and Tumner's 1986 version of the simple view. So what I like about this expanded version for grade 6-12 is you can see here that it's not just decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension, but we have to take a look at what else applies. So when we think about our younger grade levels, we think about in blue, right? Phonemic awareness and phonics being pieces that go along with decoding. We think about vocabulary and text comprehension and how do I approach text as going along with language comprehension. And we think about how fluency, being able to do those things fluently, matters. But the additional pieces that are really important to also consider for grade 6-12 include advanced phonics, right? So that's getting into and beyond the phonics skills that we typically think about being taught and mastered by the end of third grade, right? And we think about morphology as being a piece that plays a role both with decoding, right? How quickly do I see and read those morphological pieces, right? As well as my comprehension of those, say, multisyllabic words, right? And looking at the morphemes within them. And of course, that ability to use syllabication is helpful for the decoding process as well as for the encoding process, right? So we want to have some familiarity and some knowledge around that. So we're going to keep all these things in mind as we go forward. And here, of course, I can never do a session without also bringing up, of course, Hollis Scarborough's reading rope. Now, when we think about grade 6-12, we often think about a lot of what we're doing with grade 6-12 as being in the top half, if you will, right? The top part of the reading rope. A lot of language comprehension work, because often we hope that our students are coming into grade 6-12 with phonological awareness skills and phonemic awareness skills solidly in place, with the ability to decode and with a strong sight recognition or sight word recognition bank, right? So we think more so about our focus being on the top half of the rope. And all of that matters, as we know, right? And if we think back, though, to those levels of proficiency, we know that there's still work to be done in grade 6-12 on the bottom half of that rope for many of our students. So I want to share with you, and I've got each of these different, if you will, each of these different guides or research, components, piled into a nice little handbook for you. I've got these all linked on the Wakelet for you. But I want to show you that going back to 2008, and of course, even before 2008, we've known that the science of reading definitely applies to older grades. So when you look at 2008, that was an IES practice guide that looked at the practices, right? Brought together, looking at the research studies going across, the content areas going across literacy and what's needed for those upper grades, and brought it all together into a nice guide. Then we see another guide coming together for us from the Cedar Center in 2015, which, by the way, the Cedar Center now has I believe it's a 2024 edition out. And I believe I did link that most updated version on the Wakelet for you. In 2016, we saw the 10 key reading practices for all middle and high schools. That publication came out right from the Meadows. And that was a great publication, gave a lot of nice examples. But we also have this piece, Improving Literacy in Secondary Schools, a guidance report that came out from the Education Endowment Foundation in 2021. And there's also an Australian version of that is from 2022. So looking across these years, we definitely know that there are things that are very much so appropriate and necessary for secondary literacy. Now, I've listed the top 7 here, right? And these are coming from this particular guidance report. We need to prioritize disciplinary literacy across curriculum, right? We need to provide targeted vocabulary instruction in every subject area because, as we know, every subject area has its own language, right? That goes along with it. We need to develop our students' ability to read and comprehend complex text, to be able to break down complex writing tasks, to be able to combine writing with reading in every subject area, right? I'm going to write to respond and to demonstrate my comprehension of what I've read. We need to provide a lot of opportunities for our students to talk and to discuss, right? To have these peer conversations that are really high level and very appropriate to the curriculum that's being studied. And this piece, this speaking and listening piece, I feel like sometimes really gets overlooked or forgotten about in grades 6-12. And we also need to make sure that for those students who aren't there yet, whether that's 70% or 80% or 60%, that they are in fact getting interventions that are appropriate for them. So these are those top 7 pieces. You can see I've bolded 3 that I'm going to focus on specifically with you this afternoon. All right. And also, Dr. Sharon Vaughn being one of my favorite researchers out there, but I have a lot of favorites, letting us know and reminding us that it takes a village, right? It's important for content area teachers to integrate literacy practices into their instructional routines, right? In order to get the kind of momentum and success that we need with our secondary level students, right? And this can only occur when it's done throughout the day, not just kind of pigeonholed into one class period, or we're going to make sure that we always do that during ELA time. The ELA teacher is going to work on that for us. In fact, we know that this has to be happening across their entire day. So it's really important that that's a message and information that we bring back to our colleagues in our buildings. So we're going to focus first on vocabulary. Now, from all of these various publications, I've highlighted the pieces about vocabulary here on the slide for you. And these include, once again, providing that targeted, explicit vocabulary instruction in every subject, teach and reviewing several new words each day, right? So we need to make sure that we're also bringing back and expecting the use of the words that we've been teaching. We want our students to be using, right, in their speaking, in their listening, in their writing within our content areas. And there are some really important strategies that we can teach and that implement across the content areas. And that includes some things such as a teacher, I need to introduce the word. And by the way, when I introduce the word, I don't just want to write it on the board or have them write it in their notes from the book. I want to make sure I say the word so that they hear it. That's an important piece. So when I'm introducing the word, I'm going to make sure that I say it, that my students say it, that they're able to hear it and recognize it when it's spoken. And then I also want to make sure that my students are getting a student-friendly definition, one that's going to make sense to them, right? And that they're going to be able to connect with. I want to pay attention to any morphemes that are present within the words that we're choosing to focus on. I want to think about any critical attributes that go along with the meaning of that word, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. If there are cognates, right, I want to connect with those cognates, and that is particularly helpful for my students who are multi-language learners, right? Illustrations, having pictures, having visuals of these vocabulary words matters for our students. And I want to make sure that they're hearing and seeing and saying and writing and thinking about those words multiple times over, across the day, across the week, across the marking period. So these are some things that we want to pay attention to. Now, I'm going to take us into our first video here. And when we see this video, what we're going to see is this is actually a math class. So I'll give you some quick background knowledge or background information. This is a math class, and as a school, they are implementing a vocabulary routine. So you're going to see that vocabulary routine in action in this math class. So forgive me for a moment. I need to pop this open. I'm going to do a quick stop share to make sure that my screen is showing you the video. I'm going to let that load up here for a second here. Okay. And I'm going to hit play. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it and hear it. Here we go.
Improve comprehension by learning
See it?
routines for pronouncing and defining
No.
multisyllable
All right,
words.
hang on.
Teachers select content-specific words to introduce before.
Hold on, guys. I need to do the share. Helps if I do that. Okay, here we go. We're going to try that again. Can you see it? It's there. All right, now hopefully we're going to see it and hear it. Let's try that again.
Improve comprehension by learning the routines for pronouncing and defining multisyllable words. Teachers select content-specific words to introduce before students read text, or, for example, learn a new concept.
Let's begin the lesson by practicing our routine for pronouncing long words. And we're going to use this word.
8th grade math teacher Alma Perales guides students through the previously taught steps of the pronouncing routine.
What do we do first?
Divide the word into parts.
And what should each part contain?
Vowels.
Good. So help me do that.
Dilation.
What is the second thing that we do?
Pronounce each part of the word in order.
Pronounce each part of the word in order.
Dilation.
Excellent. The next thing we do is?
Say the parts together quickly.
Go.
Dilation.
Again.
Dilation.
And our last step is to make it a real word. Dilation is the correct pronunciation, so let's read it.
Dilation.
Excellent.
The teacher moves to the next step in the vocabulary instructional routine, providing a student-friendly definition shown here on a Frere model.
I'm going to give you a friendly definition of the word dilation, and I'm going to read it to you, then I would like for you to write it down. A dilation is the proportional shrinking or enlargement of a figure. Take a moment to write that down.
When students learn the routine for pronouncing multisyllable words, they are able to say the word more quickly and give more attention to the meaning. Providing a student-friendly definition also supports understanding of content area words during the lesson. Teachers who use the vocabulary instructional routine say they see the benefits.
The first time I did it, it was very difficult for me slowly pronouncing the words because that's something I'm not used to. The more I practice with it, the easier it is, and the more the students are in the routine, it seems very common for them. And I noticed that I actually read better doing it myself too.
All right, quick pause. I'm going to switch us back to the PowerPoint. Now that was watching, as I mentioned, a vocabulary routine. You heard a couple of pieces in there. So what I'm going to ask you to do as I bring us back over to our PowerPoint, I'm going to ask you to think about, thumbs up, you're seeing my PowerPoint, just want to make sure. All right, good. All right, so when you look at the bolded pieces under here, right, these strategies, pop into the chat for me, which of these did you see or hear happening in that quick little slice of vocabulary routine? Are there any that you recognize that happened or took place just in those few minutes? Definitely. The word was introduced. We heard the teacher say the word. The students broke that word down, right? Absolutely. Student-friendly definition was provided. That was an important piece. Exactly. How about repeated exposure? Did they hear that word and say that word more than once in those few minutes? Absolutely. I think I counted at least 4 or 5 times that they were saying that word and saying it more quickly and so on and so forth. So a couple of those things definitely happening within that strategy, taking place within that math classroom. So when we think about multisyllabic words, it's really important that our students hear all the parts and put them together quickly, just as you saw in that example. And something to know about multisyllable words and clues to meaning. Almost all words that are content specific, that come from science or social studies or math, right, or what have you, are of Greek or Latin origin. And what that means is that about 60% of the words then that are encountered can be deciphered, and we can get meaning of them and how it makes sense to what we're reading by analyzing the morphemes within the word, right? And also looking, of course, at the context that surrounds us. So I also want us to keep in mind the importance of looking inside the word. We saw them break it into syllables. We saw them read it quickly. We saw them get a student-friendly definition. And another piece could be to take a look then at those morphemes. Now, this is on the Wakelet for you. It is what I call a user-friendly definition formula. And so it truly is like a closed procedure or a fill in the blank. And you see it here for the various parts of speech: noun, verb, adjective, adverb. So what I want to do is show you, again, the definition that was provided by the teacher. There it is. Dilation is a proportional shrinking or enlargement of a figure or image. So this is a noun, okay? So take a look at it compared here to the formula for noun. We see dilation, right, is, and it says a proportional shrinking or enlargement of a figure or image. So we're kind of missing some of the pieces in here. I want to show you an updated version, of that in using the the friendly definition formula, the student-friendly definition formula. So now you see my updated version of that, and just take a look at the comparison here. Dilation is, and then it says category, a mathematical operation that, now we're looking for distinguishing features that uses a structuring element to shrink or enlarge a figure or image. So it's a slight adjustment of the definition, but you see now how it fits into that definition formula. So if this isn't something you've seen before, again, it's on the Wakelet for you. By the way, there are 2 free online dictionaries that put definitions into this kind of student-friendly form. If you're not familiar with those, it is the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English, LDOCE online, and the Collins-Colbild Reverso Dictionary. If you Google either of those, you'll be able to get to them and put words in and get some student-friendly definitions back in return. So those are some great tools for you and your students to take advantage of. Okay, so now we're going to check this out with a word that I'm providing. So the word is hypothermia. So I would ask my students to say the word. Say it with me. Hypothermia. Everybody? Hypothermia. Let's break that down. We know we need a vowel sound in each part that we're going to say as we break it down. So I can say hypothermia, hypothermia. So that's breaking it down by syllables, and there are 5 of those. But remember, I mentioned that another really good idea is to break it down by morphemes. So when we break it down by morphemes, we get 3 of those parts. Hypo, meaning under, beneath, or below. Therm, being a measurement of heat. And ia, right, being the state or condition of. So the nice thing about that is once we have the morphemes, we can really puzzle together the definition where we can say something to the effect, it goes like this: the state or condition of the measurement of heat being below or beneath what would be expected, right? So you can kind of piece those morphemes together to craft together a student-friendly definition. The 4-square or the Frere 4-square model is what you also saw the teacher using in that quick video. And so here is another example of using that Frere 4-square or the 4-square, but doing it with word parts. So you can see where in the top left, I focused on just the base of therm, and beneath that, providing the meaning of therm, which is a measurement or unit of heat. But then top right, I placed that within the word hypothermia and then worked to get the definition or a student-friendly definition right there with it. So hypothermia is a condition or state where the measure of heat is below normal. So think about how that fits with that formula that I showed you on the previous slide. And then, of course, not forgetting about the value of an illustration. So if you're not familiar with Frere 4-squares, the beautiful thing about it is that we can actually, kind of mix up these squares in lots of different ways with lots of different kinds of content, depending on the words that you happen to be studying. And here are some examples of things that you might put into those squares. So anything from multiple meanings or connotations, you could do synonyms and antonyms. You could pull a sentence from the text or the resource that you're reading and actually put that into one of the squares. So there's lots and lots of options for what we can do. But at the end of the day, think about this Frere Foursquare as what it truly is, and that is a graphic organizer meant to hold on to important information that helps me understand the meaning of a word, right? And so we can really pull into any of these kinds of things to help us do that. All right, so I'm going to do an implications for all at the end of each little chunk that we do this afternoon. So when we think about vocabulary, the implications for all include these things. We want to avoid the list and define method, right? It's not like, here's your list of words, go look them up in the glossary, go look them up in the dictionary, write down the definitions, because that's really not going to get as much return on investment as we want, right? So instead, we want to make sure that what we're doing is that we are selecting and teaching academic and content-specific vocabulary. If you're familiar with the terms, the vocabulary terms of being a tier 2 word or a tier 3 word, tier 2 are words that pop up often across content areas. Tier 3 words are words that are often very specific to a discipline or a specific content area. And we know we want to make sure that we are being multimodal, that we're using multi-modalities, right? Multiple modalities in what we're doing for instruction. And that's as simple as, did they get a chance to see it, hear it, say it, write it? Think about that quick video that we watched, that math vocab video. They saw it, they heard it, they said it, and they wrote it. So there was all those multi-modalities being used in that example. A knowledge rating checklist is a great tool. You'll find an example of that on the Wakelet. We also want to make sure that we are drawing attention to morphemes. We are working to provide student-friendly definitions. And by the way, getting our students to learn to come up with their own student-friendly definitions. Those formulas are really helpful for that. Lots of exposure to the word, right? And get them talking and using and writing where they're including those words. So those are all kinds of things that matter. Now we're going to shift into comprehension, okay? So as we think about comprehension, we have to start first with going back to our simple view of reading, because in order to have reading comprehension, right, over here after that equal sign, we remember that we need to have decoding as well as language comprehension, but above all, we need to make sure that we're fluent, because if I'm not fluently able to read the text, it is going to impede my ability to comprehend. We know that to be true because, right, our working memory is focused on decoding the words and not on actually understanding what it is that we're reading. So the first thing that I want to touch base on is actually about fluency. All right. So text reading fluency, we know to be the ability to read connected text accurately, rapidly, and effortlessly. And when I use rapidly, we all know that that means fast enough, but not Speedy Gonzalez, right? We're not looking for Roadrunner here. We are looking for fast enough that I'm able to, keep up, and we need to be building that rigor, if you will, and the ability to kind of keep pace. So accurate, fast enough, effortless. Fluency combines accuracy, right? That's again my ability to accurately decode with automaticity, right? And being able to also read with expression or prosody. Now, when we look at those things together, those are the things that actually facilitate a reader's construction of meaning. All right, so it's multidimensional is really the bottom line here. And so we want to make sure that we are looking for those things in our students as readers and that we are supporting building those skills in them if those are lacking. And here's a strategy that probably many of us are familiar with, and it's the idea of repeated reading, right? Repeated reading has the research behind it. But when we do repeated reading, oftentimes our students are like, you're going to make me read this again? Like, we just read that twice. Why do I have to read it again? And so I have to emphasize here with a different purpose each time. And when we come at it with a slightly different purpose each time, they're less likely to grumble at us. But also, again, it's that repeated reading that really has value within fluency. So a few suggested purposes here, if you're working to build this in with your students. First, you might have them read or skim to identify unfamiliar vocabulary, right? So what are some words in there that you're not sure about the meaning? They have to read or skim in order to come across those. And then, by the way, see if you can use the context or the word parts to help you figure that out. We also want to then maybe send them back in to read for key ideas, important details, right? What's the big idea? What's the main idea? What are the important details that I need to support that? Share that with a partner, right? Again, we want to build in opportunity for peer conversation, on-task peer conversation, of course. And then you might get students reading for a third time to answer some text-based questions that you provide. A fourth time might, again, be going into something even bigger than that. Maybe they're moving beyond something that's right there, and now they're going to need to be doing some inference work, some higher level thinking work. They're going to need to be bringing different things together. So we're getting into some higher order thinking questions. And if you use Bloom's, we know that's up there, right? With analyze, evaluate, creating, and if you're looking at the depth of knowledge, right, we know that we're getting up there as far as the numbers are concerned. So make sure that fluency is something that you are giving some time to, but in a way that makes sense for you within your content areas that you teach. Now we can focus on comprehension, right? We know we need to build background knowledge. Again, this is coming from these research guides, 2008 all the way through 2021. Building background knowledge matters. We need to provide direct, explicit comprehension strategy instruction. Now, there's a lot we can focus on and teach, but here's what we know from the research. There's 3 that really give us a lot of return on investment. Determining main idea, so working on that piece. Identifying and working with the text structure, okay? So with text structure, we know that goes beyond just narrative and expository, but it goes into also, say, patterns of organization or embedded text structure. And that might be things like cause and effect, sequence of events, and there's several different forms of that we would be looking at. We also know that we want to focus on our students' ability to generate a retell. Now, retell and summary are 2 different things. A retell is actually a lower level sort of regurgitation of everything they remembered about what was just read, said, or done. But a summary is more higher level, right? It requires them to actually weed out the excess in order to truly give you a summary. And then we see the value in teaching what we call close reading skills. And that's that work that we do at digging into, reading very closely to analyze a text and do something with that information. So I've got a couple that are bolded here that I'm going to focus on more specifically as we take a closer look. All right. So this is another place where I'm going to pop out. So I want you to think for a moment again about these pieces that I've showed you from the research. I'm going to pop out of the PowerPoint, pop us into a video. We're going to watch about 5 minutes of it, maybe, just enough to really get a good look at it. But it is longer. And by the way, I have also linked these videos onto the Wakelet for you if you want to ever return to them or share them with somebody else. So let's do a quick stop share. We'll get out of that. And if you have any questions, don't forget to pop them in to the chat feature. I'm going to make sure I do a share. See it and hear it?
So we return today in looking at Lincoln's inaugural address. Okay, the bulk of our class time today is going to be spent discussing this address.
Joanna Heppeler has already worked with her students to contextualize President Lincoln's first inaugural address. Now it's time to analyze the speech's craft and structure.
I have one question that now I'd like you to discuss. Okay?
Ms. Heppeler has the students look even closer at how the text was crafted. She asks them to find specific evidence in the language used by President Lincoln that addresses a claim made in their own textbook.
A lot of the questions that I asked you were to help clarify your thinking about the text, okay? But now I'd like you to go back in and do a really close read. And in close reading, we really want to go and think about the text and think about evidence that we can be using to make an argument. Okay? Your textbook, Bailey, okay, in the American pageant, makes an argument. It's the very start of chapter 20 where he'll talk about the inauguration. Okay? And Bailey argues that Lincoln is firm yet conciliatory in his address. Okay? I want you to find phrases. What phrases could we use as evidence to support Lincoln is firm? What evidence could we use, phrases or words, that shows he's being conciliatory? Okay, but before we set out, let's clarify the meaning of these two words. What is firm? What does it mean to be firm?
Like strong.
Strong or strict? Straightforward? Is he going to bend?
No.
No. Okay, so he's kind of uncompromising, unbending. He's standing strong in his beliefs. Okay? So what phrases fit that? Versus conciliatory. Now, what does it mean if you're conciliatory?
Understand.
Good thought.
Never mind.
Okay. No. That was good. That was good. Okay. Michelle?
Kind of like resolving like problems-ish.
Very good. Resolving problems.
Don't worry, he doesn't shut
Another
down.
word
You'll
that you
see
can
him be
use is
very
friendly.
Involved still.
Okay, so if you're conciliatory, you're sort of like extending that hand out, resolving the differences, trying to see the better. So take about 3 minutes. I'm going to ask you in 3 which words, phrases fit what. Okay, so go ahead, highlight them, circle them, star them. Firm or conciliatory?
Line 170, he says, I am both people's grand enemies. He's being friendly, and then if you keep on reading, though passion may have strained it, must not break our bonds of affection. He's still trying to be friendly there, but there's always like a hint of, firmness in when he's always talking.
So, like, I mean, you can pretty much kind of counter-argue every one of them for each.
Everything, yeah, it's like half and half on each.
When he's talking about God, like, he'll be on your side, either north or the south. So they're kind of like trying to unite them, so that's kind of being friendly, I guess.
Like the Sephardic said, strong religion back then, and he was trying to find a commonality between the two. So we have God.
That's something where he's being really firm.
Firm?
Yeah. He doesn't bend. Kind of like every time he talks about the Constitution.
Yeah.
So he's like that's straightforward. Like this for the
firm
Constitution.
interpreter of the Constitution.
Yeah, really.
All right, let's bring it back full circle. So please tell us a line and number where you're finding that phrase. I'm looking for phrases that support firm. Joe.
4, I take the official oath today with no mental reservation, when with no purpose to construe the Constitution or laws by any hypocritical rules.
Good. Nice phrase there, right? I will not construe this. All right? I'm not going to manipulate that Constitution. Another line, another phrase for firm. Nicole?
I'm going to pause it there. If you would, in the chat feature, would you pop something that you saw that you've heard me talk about just in the time that we've had together this afternoon? What was something you saw happening just in this lesson that we were able to see? Could have been something from vocabulary, could have been something I just mentioned about comprehension. Pop it into the chat, and I'm going to go right back over to our PowerPoint so that we can pick it up from there. Yes. There was a focus for reading. I saw somebody mentioning making sure that they understood some of those key, the key meanings. Rereading with a specific purpose. Absolutely. Excellent, excellent. Meanings. Yes. So there was definitely a lot of different things that we were seeing in there. I'm going to pop this back over here to screen 1. Excellent. Here we go. Rereading with a purpose, digging in. And by the way, you can give me a yes, no. You can give me a thumbs up using your little icons. You can pop it in the chat. Could you see this easily moving into, say, an essay or some written response that they're really getting set up nicely for, and they're probably could be pretty successful with? Yes, me too. Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's, yes, you got it. So man, they're going in and they're really categorizing based on these 2 words, right? firm and conciliatory, looking at what was said in that speech, but then you can see how that can then go right with them, picking out that evidence into whatever's going to be happening next. And remember, in disciplinary literacy, having a problem or a sort of an essential question is often part of what we're doing and working with. So you can see how this also corresponds nicely back to what may need to be happening within that discipline. All right, so a couple tools that I have popped onto the Wakelet for you that will help you with close reading. And one in particular is this generating text-dependent questions. So if you're looking for some support in generating those types of questions for your students, or even getting your students involved with generating some themselves or working with a partner to generate some, it's a nice tool. It's broken into categories like text-based or text-dependent questions that will focus on central and main idea, key details, vocabulary, and it goes on through a few more categories as well. So that's a really nice tool to grab from the Wakelet. Oop, going the wrong way. Let's go the right way. So now I've just got a couple minutes here that I want to show you of a math example. Now, in this example, I want us to think that we know with instruction, especially when we think about explicit instruction, that it needs to have a gradual release of responsibility, that I do, the we do, the you do, right? And so that I do is me, the teacher, modeling for my students. Then I get them doing it together or with me before I'm expecting them to perhaps do it on their own. So this example is actually the teacher modeling. So this is an I do. I'm going to model for you. So let's just take a moment or two to watch this one. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to pop us over to it. Give me a quick moment here. And it's very short, but I think you'll get a lot out of it. Let's see, open that up. All right.
Now we're going to look at a word problem, and we're going to be using the techniques of chunking, skimming, and highlighting. Now, when you get to a word problem and there's any kind of graphic, maybe it's a pie chart, maybe it's a bar graph, maybe it's a triangle, anytime you get to where there's a graphic, look at the graphic first. That's part of skimming. We're going to look at the graphic and see if we can even start to think about what the problem's going to be asking us. So, when I look at this, there's two columns. The most important part are the headings. This one says type of comic strip, number of responses. That's the heading. Now I'm going to look down the two columns. I have political, animal, sports, family. 9, 126, 108, and 50. So I'm already saying, okay, these are the headings, and this looks like some categories. Different categories of comic strips. So I'm already forming an idea of what the question's going to be or what the problem's going to be about. So that was an example of skimming through the problem. Look at the graphic and see what you can already understand about the graphic. Now we're going to go back up and read the problem. Mary created 4 categories to describe different types of newspaper comic strips. Okay, part of chunking. I'm going to stop right there. And I may even reread it. Mary created 4 categories. Oh, she created 4 categories. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4. This diagram here, this graphic, is going to be talking about the graph that Mary made. She made a table. So, okay, I'm making a connection. I'm saying this goes with this, and I'm also understanding the problem now. So that was part of chunking. I stop, I pause, and I think, what's this telling me? She then surveyed 293 high school freshmen to identify the one type of comic strip each student preferred. Again, I'm going to stop. I'm going to look for anything that's really important. I may even rephrase. I'm chunking this. She then surveyed 293 high school freshmen. Okay, that's going to probably be important, so I'm going to circle it. And they each got to choose one type of comic strip. Well, that's telling me that these numbers here are what they chose. I'm making a connection between the graphic and the words that I'm reading. The results of her survey are shown in the table below. Okay, I'm going to chunk and I'm going to stop. I'm going to pause. Now I'm going to look with detail. Make sure I understand what the graphic is. Then I'm going to read the question. What is the percent of freshmen surveyed who prefer family comic strips? This is where we're going to highlight. I really want you to be an active reader. As we're reading through, we're circling numbers that we see important, words that we see important, and we're going to underline the question. What is the percent of freshmen surveyed who prefer family comic strips? Okay, we want to make sure we're clearly answering the question that's being asked. So we're going to underline the question. That's part of highlighting. Further, let's go back to that question and see if there's a word that's maybe even more important than the other words. I like, what is the percent? When I see this word percent, we had it up here on our word wall.
She has a word wall.
So I'm going to say, okay, it's a percent question. And I'm also going to see it's talking about the family comic strips. We're narrowing it down. I'm highlighting the important parts of the question. And I'm going to go back and make sure I circle the things that are important. Well, I've got the 293 total. But what about the family comic strips? I need to focus in on that now. The family is here, and it's 50. I'm going to circle it. This underlining the question, circling the information is all part of highlighting, and it makes an active reader. When you're done with your reading the word problem, you're going to have scratches, you're going to have words and numbers on your paper. So now I'm able to set up the mathematical problem. I understand the question. I may even rephrase it. Out of 293 freshmen, 50 of them selected family comic strips. Okay, I'm going to rephrase it. 50 out of 293. So now we've used our reading skills to come up with 50 out of 293. All right.
Once again, if you would, pop into the chat for us. What are some strategies, whether it was particularly comprehension strategies that you saw happening in that quick video? Anything that you had as an aha or a takeaway from watching that quick little math example? Absolutely. You guys are always giving me some great answers over here. Let me do a share back over here. Skimming, absolutely. Headings, making connections. You heard her phrase and rephrase, right? It was as if she was getting to, if you will, the main idea. What is the main idea, the main question? What is it that we're after here? Kind of, sometimes in word problems, you have to sift through the extra stuff, right, to get to the meat of it all. So it's, again, just a really great way of highlighting, pun intended, I guess. What are the things that we need to be doing as active readers, even within a math class or with a math problem? All right, so let's move us forward to some implications for all related to comprehension. Y'all are seeing my PowerPoint again? Yes? Beautiful. All right, implications for all. And by the way, these implications for all are also on the Wakelet for you. Avoid the read and answer the questions method, right? We know we need to be building background knowledge. It's really important. So help students do that by using activators. Perhaps you're using some kind of a top-down topic web or a graphic organizer that has some information on it. Then they're maybe adding to that. We want to make sure that we're modeling this as well as supporting our students while they do it and then eventually do it on their own, right? And we want to refer to things like skimming and chunking and stopping and phrasing and rephrasing and paraphrasing, looking at text structure and features, right? And of course, what do we need to do if we're not clear on what we've just read? So what are those strategies that we need to use for those purposes as well? Engaging our students in repeated reading for multiple purposes. Even when you look at handling that math problem, it wasn't just read one time, was it? But she went back in and she read it and read part of it, maybe not the whole thing, but she was going back and still reading pieces of it as she was working to get to setting up what would be the math problem to get to the answer. So those repeated readings for multiple purposes are really something that is so helpful. And it also helps to show our students that there's a reason we're asking them to keep going back in. And I highlighted at the bottom for us, connecting back to an essential question. That is often a great way to center what we're doing, and especially when we're thinking about being, focusing on disciplinary tasks, right? Disciplinary tasks in general. Okay, let's go. So the final piece that I want to talk about this afternoon is providing opportunities for our students to collaborate and discuss. So we need to make sure that we are giving our students a lot of opportunities to talk, not talk back and forth with us, right? Not that give and take of student to teacher, teacher to student, student to teacher, right? But rather student to student to student, and then back to the teacher. That's going to help build our students' background knowledge, help them to make connections, help them to have some aha moments, and really to go deeper and think more critically. So we want to focus on what is it that the research is telling us about having the opportunity to collaborate and discuss. It talks about providing opportunities for discussions that are sustained interactions, right? Involving interpretation and analysis. We're thinking higher level pieces here, right? Of a text. We want to provide those opportunities for collaboration with peers. It may mean that we need to teach them some ways to be appropriately collaborative, right? So what is that going to look like and sound like? You might want to do a little fishbowl activity. You might want to provide them with some collaboration stems, if you will, right? So stems to get them started with what they're going to say or how they might respond to a peer. And we want to provide them with opportunities, again, to do this, discussing content, thinking critically, and multiple perspectives. That's big, right? Really having the opportunity to get and to really, I would say, gain from hearing multiple perspectives on a topic. Here are some best practices on academic conversations. We're going to see this in action with this class, and then we're going to have a chance to touch base on a few pieces. As you watch this, I want you to take note. What are some things that you're hearing or saying or hearing them say, seeing them do, or hearing them talk about and share that has set them up for success? What does it look like? What does it sound like? So we're going to go ahead and pop into that. This is our final little video segment of the day here. Oh, did it go into the right spot? Yeah, I think it did. Let's see. We'll know in a second. Nope, give me a minute, guys.
As I'm in the midst of applying for residency right now, wish me luck, Grammarly has again been a lifesaver with my application in helping me write my personal statement and CV. Grammarly is your digital writing assistant. It's an all-in-one tool.
Okay, we're there.
Put yourself in the doctor's shoes.
I mean, what if the child was a little bit older? Maybe what if he was about 10 to 13? Would your
Words are the fundamental toolkit to extend any conversation. An academic conversation is a learned structure in which students explore ideas and negotiate meanings to deepen understanding and connections.
I feel like it would make me feel good if I know I could save someone's life.
In an academic conversation, students learn how to articulate their thinking through the use of conversational starters such as...
My experience with this is...
What do you mean by that reference?
An example from the text says...
Anything that has resonated with you, or anything that has made you think. The difference between just having conversation in class and having an academic conversation is students are using specific vocabulary. They're using phrases and statements that are allowing them to articulate what they're thinking. So it's getting to that critical thinking portion of it. They're showing that they're problem solving, that they're thinking through things, they're listening to somebody else, they're responding to it, and sound like an intelligent human being, which is sort of the goal for all of them.
Be nice to view it as a sort of free market solution to this problem of someone not having a kidney.
Today's academic conversation is built upon imaginary scenarios. Students decide if they agree, disagree, or remain undecided about a situation. They talk as a group and in pairs. They share information and defend their thinking. Academic conversations are nurtured through direct instruction, opportunities to practice, and meaningful participation.
Excellent.
We had a couple worksheets also that kind of gave you a beginning to like how to start your question off. So that's definitely what's helped. And we also had just sample conversations that we've had with each other. So we've had time to practice, and so we know the best way to answer a question and how to respond.
That if it was my family, I would do anything for my family member.
You can't just jump into a higher level conversation and expect your kids to do it perfectly. You kind of have to work with them to build up to having a full-on discussion.
And I agree that doctors should give a transfusion. You're going to go over here.
So doing things kind of on a daily basis helps them. Having practice, certainly making an environment that they feel safe. I think that's an important thing. If they don't feel that they can have a wrong answer or state their opinion, they don't feel then they're not going to share with the class.
When you're doing the academic conversations and just moving around and interacting, you definitely see a different side of the person that you wouldn't see in a traditional classroom.
To get students interested in academic conversation, you want to pick high interest, polarizing topics. But at the same time, you don't want it to become too personal so that you lose sight of the ethical or moral questions, and you don't want to get bogged down in different people's opinions that are purely based on emotion.
Academic conversations are a versatile learning strategy.
What we did today in our academic conversation showed rigor, relevance, and relationships by having the students talk at a very high level. They were critically thinking as they were answering each other's questions and persuading. That's a rigorous part of it. It was relevant to the content in that we were talking about ethics. We can relate it to medical ethics in this case, so a science background. And the relationship part of it, they had to build these relationships amongst themselves and feel safe enough to have those types of relationships both with me and with the students in their class. Have we made any dent in your thinking?
All right. In the chat, if you would, please share something that something that you're taking away, something you noticed, whether that was about supporting. Again, obviously, they need to comprehend what they're understanding about the scenarios, but give me some takeaways. Share that in the chat, if you would. And I'm going to pop us back over to our PowerPoint. Thank you for being so active with me this afternoon, by the way, using the chat feature, because you get a chance to see and hear from one another. Also, yeah, lots of good takeaways here. And by the way, that idea, again, of the sentence starters or the stems, let me pop us into... I want to share with you that one of the things that, two things rather, that I've put onto the Wakelet for you to go along with that idea of some sentence starters, bridging language. So you see that bridging language document that's on the left-hand side of my screen. That is on the Wakelet for you. And what's beautiful about that is that bridging language works wonderfully for supporting oral conversations, that peer dialogue, those peer conversations. But by the way, it also works well, bringing it then into what they're writing, doesn't it? So big piece. Yeah. Sarah, thank you, by the way, for popping that link back in there. Safe space. So there's so much that happens when we have the opportunities for our students to have these kinds of conversations. And if you have, by the way, a tool that you've used that's been successful, go ahead and share that in the chat box. Down at the bottom of this slide that I have up here on the screen, implications for all, some tools that I've used, that bridging language, that second bullet that you see up from the bottom, bridging language, that's one that I mentioned that's on the Wakelet. Question prompts, that's on the Wakelet. Socratic seminar is sometimes a popular one with some teachers, particularly in grades 6 to 12. And also something called Talk Moves. If you're not familiar with Talk Moves, I'd encourage you to give that a Google or whatever tool you like to use to look up your information on the web. Talk Moves. Some of it may seem a little bit elementary, but especially if you're, say, in 6th grade, 7th grade, they're very new to having these kinds of conversations. It can be very helpful. So what are the other implications for all? Again, we're working to avoid just the teacher-student dialogue, right? That's not the way that we want to have a discussion. Much more value when all of our students are getting a chance or being asked to think and talk and think and talk and respond, rather than just kind of sitting passively while only a few people do that. We want to make sure that we're engaging our students in sustained critical conversations. You see there, I've said 14 plus minutes per period. That's what the research is telling us, right? If we can get them in sustained conversations about text and or content for about 14 minutes per period, that's what we're aiming for. I'm not saying that more is bad, but we want to try to work up their, if you will, their rigor for being able to sustain those conversations in a really positive and productive way. And you heard some of the students share, by the way, like what are some good things to keep in mind when you're planning for this dialogue or this discussion, again, related to your content, but connected to what your students know and care about, right? Related to your content, but also to community, related to your content, but maybe also social media or what's happening in the news. Get to what matters to them, but as a few of you said in the chat, be careful that it's not too close to home, that there might be too many emotions stirred up from it. Emotion is good, but we don't want to, lead to something that's really, really touchy for our students. So walking that tightrope as always, right? All right, just a couple things on disciplinary literacy, and then I want to open it up for questions as well. So be thinking about what it is you're wondering about. But with disciplinary literacy, coming back to the top part of this, again, this table, thinking about the advanced reading and writing to learn that happens in a very specialized way that is unique to the subject area. So, what are some key themes which guide disciplinary literacy instruction? I've mentioned a few times this afternoon that it is problem or question driven. That is very common, right? We want students doing some higher level work because this disciplinary literacy requires it. So we need our students to be able to access, analyze, and create a variety of texts that are typical of the discipline, right? We want, as educators, to make sure that we are intentionally integrating these instructional practices within and across units of study. We want to also make sure that we are building in opportunities to connect to our communities and to our networks in really relevant, practical, realistic ways, right? Like, how does our discipline connect with the community and to the content that we're really focusing on? And not forgetting about attending to language, because what our students are able to think about and talk about and discuss, then they should be able to bring into what they're going to be writing about, right? It gives them that opportunity to get set up for success, as we know. Now, I want to share with you a couple of things. This is on the Wakelet for you. If you're not able to see it because your screen is small, I'm just going to give you an idea of what's here. Going down the left-hand side, we see science, history, math, ELA. Going across, we see read, write, think. So, for example, in science, it says, when scientists read, they ask why more than what. That's one example. When historians read, they interpret primary and secondary sources and identify bias. So this is a nice table to kind of give you an overarching look at some ways that might be a little unique or specific to some of the discipline areas. It's on the Wakelet for you. Also on the Wakelet for you, take a look at the top part of Scarborough's rope when it's made to be more specific to a disciplinary area. So you see science at the top. What are we looking at for language comprehension? Background knowledge is often facts and concepts. Vocabulary is often technical terms. Language structure is often very succinct and precise. Verbal reasoning, we have informed skepticism, integrating results and data. And literacy knowledge is my ability to read and comprehend tables, graphs, figures, comparison of findings. It's a specialized genre. When we see math, again, we're going to see how that's different. With background knowledge, it's mathematical concepts and skills. Vocabulary are words with technical and non-technical meanings, as well as symbols. Symbols have meaning, right? Language structure, extreme precision, unique formulations, right? Verbal reasoning, integrating verbal and mathematical thinking. And we see for literacy knowledge, multiple representations of the same concepts in equations, graphs, figures, and narratives. So I need to be able to move in and out of those, much like we saw a little glimpse of in that earlier video that was focused on getting ready to solve that word problem. These also exist for history and literature. Okay, so looking specifically at history, facts, concepts being the background knowledge, vocabulary, historical and technical terms, language structures, historical syntax. Think about the way we used to write, the way that we used to order our words, just much longer, richer, sometimes more complex sentence structures than perhaps we often use today. So that historical syntax, avoiding presentism and contextualization in our verbal reasoning. And for literacy knowledge, again, getting into multiple text, primary sources, secondary sources, looking at timelines, looking at maps. And I'm not going to, you can take a look at the literature one, but I want to leave some time to also see what questions you may have. I'm seeing a love this. I'm glad you love this. I love it too. Was that you, Christy? Yes, I love it. And by the way, how nice to be able to say, listen, we're all trying to help tackle the top part of Scarborough's reading rope. What does it look like for you all in the science department? What does it look like for you all in the history or the social studies department, right? We all can do this, and we acknowledge that it's going to look and feel a little different, but still it all connects back to language comprehension, because at the end of the day, it just does. Okay, so looping back to our guiding questions, thinking about how does the science of reading, can we answer this? Does the science of reading extend into upper grades? Yes, absolutely. And now we have a good idea of how and what that looks like. We had a look at some instructional implications. What do we need to take away from some of this research? And who else needs to know about this? So I want to open it up to questions. If you want to add a comment, if you would like me to show you something on the Wakelet, whatever it may happen to be, I want to give you a few minutes to be able to do those things. I'm seeing some loving this and good content. I appreciate that. I know how tough it is to, bring this up sometimes into grade 6 to 12 and help it feel important and relevant to everyone that's doing the work up there. Oh, yes. I'm seeing Courtney. Is it possible for content area teachers to also support word recognition skills in the classroom? So many high schools don't have foundational literacy instruction. I'm going to do a little stop share here so I can open and see more of your faces. That will be helpful to me. So Courtney, yes, one of the things that I would actually say that I think any content area teacher could do is helping their students to be able to attack those multisyllable words in their content area. So let's say there are some multisyllabic words that they're going to be coming up in the unit, in what they're going to be reading. And if they put that multisyllabic word up, much like you saw the math teacher do in one of our first videos this afternoon, but break that word down, break it into its morphemes. Take a look at it so that they are modeling for their students. Hey, we can pause and look at this really long multisyllabic words that I know a lot of you just skip over. But if we just skip over it, we're losing some really important information. So let's tackle it instead. So having all teachers become comfortable with at least putting it up there, saying it, having their students say it, breaking it into morphemes. What do those morphemes mean? What can I take away from this? I think that's even just one little thing that all teachers can do to help work on some of that. In the process, you're starting to look again more specifically at those smaller chunks, in this case, morphemes, but you could also break it into syllables, right? And there's a great video by Patan. Patan has a great video. It's called Reading. I think it's called Reading Big Words. Sarah, are you familiar with that one?
I know Patan, but I don't know that video.
I think it's called Reading Big Words.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you do a Google, you'll see a quick little video that actually models breaking down big words. And so you could show that to your staff and talk about how they can help break words down. And that is something that's foundational, but that can be doable for a lot of teachers. once they get a chance to practice with each other too. Because, you know, that's not something a lot of them are used to needing to do, but it is something that many can have some success with. Were there other questions I missed up there, Christy?
Sorry, yes, there's a couple. We have, so I think you touched on that one. The websites with the kid-friendly definition tool.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to, what I'm going to do right now, you guys, because I have them actually open. That's why I'm looking over here at my second screen. I'm going to copy and paste the URLs into the chat right now. This one is the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English Online, LDOCE Online. That's one of them. And then I'm also going to grab this other one. And this one is the Reverso Dictionary. Now, by the way, who has probably used these more than anybody in the past are teachers of multi-language learners. Because of the way that it's structured. These websites also, by the way, most often, did I do that one? Let me back this up here real quick. Okay, yeah, I did. Sorry, give me a second here. I just want to pop that in again because I think I may have missed part of the URL. This one is that the second dictionary. It's coming your way. It happens to be taking you to the dilation page so you can see the dilation, the word dilation, and what it looked like on the Reverso, in the Reverso dictionary. It's nice because they often will put it into a sentence. There's often a little icon that your students can click on to hear the word said, because so often our students may know a word, right, in their speaking and listening vocabulary, but they do not recognize it in print. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so important for them to hear it, because sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I've heard that word before. They just don't know what it looks like, right? They just don't recognize that multisyllabic word. So thank you for asking that question. Others, Christy?
Yeah, in your experience, are there best ways to shift the conversation from some teachers saying, I don't teach reading, to we all teach reading, and then it mentions that beautiful reading rope overlay of the content areas?
Yes. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge that the importance of disciplinary literacy, right? So we've got to acknowledge that. We know that many of our teachers feel the angst or the pressure to get to their content and make sure that they're teaching their content and their standards because, again, they feel the angst and the pressure surrounding that. So we have to help them see the ways that this can be beneficial to their students comprehending and accessing their content and actually being able to then work at higher levels of thinking, right? Be able to actually do critical thinking and be able to tackle higher level problems. So I think it involves really building, I think it often builds small, but I also have to say that when we look, I'm a data girl, right? So when I go look when I look at the data and I see that 60, 70, 80% of our students that we share as a faculty are not proficient readers and writers, I have to acknowledge that there's going to be some problems sometimes with me expecting them to perhaps do or complete some of these disciplinary literacy tasks. So it's going to behoove me as well, right, to figure out what are some things that I can take on. And it's the vocabulary. Sometimes it's the critical conversations. It's the close reading. But again, go to those Scarborough Rope, the top half of Scarborough Ropes that are disciplinary specific, and help them see, listen, we acknowledge this is what it's going to look like and sound like in your classrooms. We're not asking you to make it look and sound like the ELA version of this, right? They can see that it's the ELA one doesn't look the same. But yeah, it's truly, I think, because as faculty, we get frustrated, right? We know where we want our students to be able to be and to be able to do. But if we don't figure out how to fill in the gap that's between where they are and where we want them to be and where we want them to be able to function, we're just going to continue to wander around frustrated, right? And it truly takes a village. And I think that's an important conversation to have. All hands on deck. Absolutely. It's definitely all hands on deck. It takes whatever resonates with your faculty, with your peers, and start small. Like, could we all do this one strategy? and and have them have those conversations like in their department or middle school, perhaps as a team, right? If you have the teams, if you're set up by teams, what is it going to look like and sound like in our history classrooms, in our science classrooms, this strategy, and give them the opportunity to talk about that and to get feedback, right? And it's funny because you'll be surprised some of the things that I've seen that like science and social studies teachers take on like that, and they're like, oh, we do that. We just don't call it that. Right. And so you can connect with them that way sometimes really well. Okay, great. We're gonna keep calling it that. That's what you're gonna keep calling it over there in your department. But we just know that we're doing the same thing, right? So yeah.
Another quick question was that they're wondering how this information that you presented, which was so amazing, will be shared. The recorded video will be shared out.
Yes.
I believe. And how else can they access? Is there any other place that they need to access that information beside the Wakelet?
So Sarah, somebody's gonna send out the video link, correct?
Yes. So
does it expire, or is it kind of like forever going to be something that exists for them?
It will be on our YouTube channel forever, as long as you're okay with that.
Yeah,
so you should get a follow-up email in the next day or two, with the link to the video, which will be on our YouTube channel. And also, I'll put in the Wakelet link. And if there's anything else you want us to include, Colleen, please feel free to let me know. But any way people can reach out to you or
absolutely. So you can reach me at Colleen. It's 2 L's and 2 E's, Colleen at Keys to Literacy, and that's TO, not the number 2. And feel free to email me there. You can also connect with me if you're somebody who uses Facebook. We have the 3rd grade and beyond Facebook group that you can search for and find. There are a lot of free tools connected with much of this that you'll find on the Keys to Literacy website, as well as recorded webinars on other topics. And so I think that's a really great resource because, again, it's free. You just have to sign up for the free access. So you'll have to put in your email and in order to be able to get that, because it will be behind a password, but again, it's free. And Sarah, if it's okay with you, I'll also link the YouTube video on the Wakelet. So if you have one, but you don't have the other, you can find your way back. Perfect. I saw somebody ask about the videos. If you're asking about the instructional videos that I shared, yes, Mary, I do have them on the Wakelet. And I'm just going to take a quick peek on the Wakelet so I can tell you where those are at. So if you're on the Wakelet, I believe give me 1 second here. Got to get across a little bit further here. Yes. So they're listed for you. Don't want to give the wrong answer. Under the Tier 1 Universal Instruction column. So if you go to that column and you go to, it says the science of reading at secondary levels, and it's the implications for all. So you're going to see it say the science of reading at secondary levels, and then the little text beneath that says implications for all, because remember, I also gave you all the implications. So the bottom of that, if you go to that document, at the bottom are the links to all the videos I used in the presentation today. So you can click on those and watch them again, watch the rest of it, because I didn't share, some of them I didn't share the whole thing. And if you know anybody who might be interested, sometimes that's a good way, like, hey, math department, you want to watch this math teacher do this quick little thing? It could be great for a PLC or something like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Colleen. That Wakelet is invaluable. That is amazing.
I feel like I need on there. Oh, what? I'm sorry. Say that again, Sarah.
Oh, all the resources on there are amazing.
Yes. And it's a living, breathing thing. So I will continue to add other things to it, as I come across them. So don't be surprised if you're on there, I don't know, 6 months from now and you're like, hey, I don't remember this. It might not have been there today. So, but it is there now. So time go and add things. Yeah.
That's even more amazing. Thank you.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you for that, and thank you for presenting today and for being part of this work in Maine and beyond. We're so lucky to have you participating and being part of our advisory council. And
happy to
I
be
know
part
I
of it.
learned a lot. I work with K-5, so this has been great. And
But hopefully also saw the connection, Sarah, right?
oh, totally, totally. Yes.
We can do this. We can do this pre-K-12, and we can do this at the higher ed level
Yeah.
for our students that need it there. So absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
all so much, though, for taking the time out of your busy lives and your afternoon, or even if you're watching this later on as the recording, to get this information and to like, just refine where you're at. Some of it may have been affirming, some of it may have been some new information or extended information, and I'm just thankful that you are here on behalf of your students and your colleagues. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, your passion for literacy education is very evident, and I'm sure we all share the same passion. But
thing, isn't it?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You all have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.